It comes from choosing partners from scarcity. It comes from choosing from our, traumas or the insecurities, right? As opposed to actually listening deep down inside. And that's why the cycle of finding, for example, partners that exhibit the same similar behaviors, because we are mirrors. We mirror each other.
Today's guest is someone who's walked through fire, literally and metaphorically, and emerged with a blueprint for transformation. Sravan Allopi, known as the founder of Sovereign Resilience Coaching, is a former British Armed Forces combat medic turned integration coach specializing in masculine sovereignty and achievement anxiety transformation with 13 plus years of breathwork and Reiki practice. He's helped ambitious men reclaim their lives through breathwork, conscious integration awareness, and a no-nonsense approach to healing. From battlefield trauma to emotional burnout, Sravan's journey is a masterclass in resilience. If you've ever questioned the credentials of online coaches or wondered how to vet someone guiding your healing, this episode is for you. Sravan, thank you so much for joining me and the Glenn Gilbert Connection. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Glenn. Really appreciate you having me on, man.
So before we get started, tell us a little more about your history and how you got to where you are today.
We'll roll it back to growing up in the UK. So originally I'm from South Africa. Moved over here when I was 7 years old with my mother. So for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to serve in the military, but I wanted to be in a role where I was helping others. It comes from maybe the generational cycles of doctors, healers, farmer. Like my grandfather was a pharmacist, my grandmother was a head matron, my uncles on both sides are doctors. So mum became a teacher, but she was also studying for medicine before she decided, nope, teaching is the way forward for her. But ultimately, it's passing on knowledge and help to serve others. For myself, I always had this passion for understanding how to help other people through their own struggles. And this was long before I knew anything about medicine or getting into the field. I've always had a spiritual background as well. So that's where under my mum, I studied and I learned from her the practice of breath work, mindfulness, tapping into what a philosophy known as EHV, which is Education in Human Values, which dates back to, it's like a Sanskrit philosophy. Okay. And it's all about essentially just operating with right conduct. And basically our roles as humans is to serve others, to serve mankind, and conduct ourselves in a way in which we're just elevating consciousness. So that naturally led into learning about psychology, human psychology, tying in with the spiritual practices. And that's where I learned Reiki, which is Japanese hands-on healing, using energy within the body to heal the body. And then also once you reach master level, you can transfer it onto other people. And yeah, from the age of 18, I was basically a Reiki master, breathwork facilitator. Although, at that time, I didn't really know that there were other people who may have been doing it in a professional capacity. It's just something that I did. And I then joined the army at 19. And pretty much for the entirety of my 20s, I think I was about 27 when I left, I trained and I studied to be a combat medical technician. And yeah, as you can imagine, being trained up to EMT status, that has its great perks, but also many challenges. I was instrumental when the pandemic dropped. I won't speak too much about that because I know that can also be sensitive, but I was instrumental as one of the first response teams to be on the ground when it all hit. And yeah, that for me was like my baptism by fire, so to speak. I worked with the UK's NHS first aid response teams. I was on emergency response cars. I worked in clinical wards, GPs. I was just everywhere. So I covered the whole spectrum there. And what happened was I reached a point where I just think that cognitively, mentally, and even emotionally, I just sort of burnt out. And I just said, no, I can't do this anymore. I left the military. Not at the best timing either, because that's when we fell feet first into the second wave. So that also led from an extremely organized, regimented way of life to complete chaos. And naturally, I descended into that way of being. And so I found myself just getting lost in binge watching shows, like gaming till early hours of the morning, just doing anything that I could to suppress and numb the pain. And it was only after about a year of being in that process and reaching some pretty dark moments myself there. Sure. I then stopped. I sought help. I sought help in the form of therapy, and I think from that point on, there were events that just led to me essentially reconnecting and rediscovering just exactly what my purpose was. And through that process, I reconnected with, my spiritual element, the breath work. I then also had really powerful tools from my military training, the clinical element, understanding how the effects of the spiritual component and the somatic element can affect the body and the mind and essentially change your state of being and also your view on life. And so, fast forward 5 years, that's where it's led me to building Sovereign to help men reclaim their true masculine essence. I'm not talking about red pill ideology or any of the trending social media norms. I'm talking about using tools within the body to empower ourselves mentally and emotionally, and from that, directing that into purpose to then live what I coin like sovereign lives. And that's essentially what I'm doing right now.
Can you give us a quick example of what some of those tools might be? Just like one or two?
Yeah, sure. So one of the primary drivers is the somatic element. So breath work. Yep. Yeah. You can't, the way I look at it also is there's so many external factors to, conventional wellness as we see it. But one thing that everybody has, regardless of whoever you are, whether you have a disability or you don't, your race, color, creed, shape, size, is you have breath in your lungs. And for myself, a big part of my transformational process and coming back to the path was recognizing that I could use my breath to shift my state of consciousness. I could change the way in which I felt within my body. I could stop those mental loops that I was getting caught up in. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest takeaway was that this power was all within me all along. So, with that, it led to just understanding that you don't need to externalize so much. And so when I speak to my clients and I have conversations with other people about this, I always do my best to help them see that whatever their struggle is, you can control your breath, and everything else is actually an afterthought. We actually have very little control of anything external to us, but you can control your breath, which then controls your thoughts, and your thoughts also have an impact on your emotions, which then lead to belief systems. And that within itself is like, I guess like the conventional term is like biohacking, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the ultimate biohack. And that's one modality that I use. Do you want me to explain on the others that I use, or?
Oh, I've got questions for you, but
go for it.
I think we'll go into those different modalities. What you were just talking about, I'm reminded of Andrew Huberman, and he was talking about what you were just saying, breath work, and it was just something where you take an inhale, and then you slow it out, and then you take an inhale, and then do a little more to open up the alveoli, the small sacs in your lungs, to get that extra CO2 out, and that was supposed to drop your pulse. I think it was like your pulse by like 10 points or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just, here's a simple way to just start relaxing, right?
Hmm.
Talking about ruminating,
Yeah.
and then doing some breathing work for rumination, because when you start ruminating, you're going to try, you're chasing after an answer that will never come, right? So it's like, you got to figure out a different way of addressing that. And one of those things is like, just breathe. And like you said, you can calm yourself down and maybe have a different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to expand a little bit on that, that's one of the like the markers that I actually go through with my clients, and when I even just explain just how to people who are a little bit skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us have got devices that track our health metrics in the form of Fitbits, Apple Watches, smartphones, whatever it is, right? I tell them, if you just take 60 seconds of your time to do this one breathing practice, I call it the 4-7-8 breathing protocol,
Mm-hmm.
where you essentially you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you exhale for 8 seconds. Why those three factors, those numbers in particular? So over time, I've experimented with the breath. It's essentially an inhale followed by a breath hold and then a release. What I've come to realize is those three numbers for the specific segments have the most impact on your ability to cycle fresh oxygen into the bloodstream and into the lungs. When you hold that breath, you are building up the CO2 that then gets released from the alveoli. And in the exhale, you feel the endorphins like it's like literally surging and rushing through your body, which is what creates the maximum somatic release. And it's like I don't know, it's like a 5-in-1 kind of impact where you're seeing real data changing in real time. You're feeling the effects. You're also increasing your VO2 max volume, which can only help you with your ability to breathe. It also breaks down whatever I call like mental fog is in the mind. And it allows you to think with more clarity, which then boosts awareness, cognitive function. And also, because our thoughts and our emotions are linked, right, through our neural pathways, and the way in which the electrical activity that exists throughout our body and the way that it moves. Joe Dispenza has a good way of explaining this. He talks about the mind heart connection. Mm-hmm. So if you look, you can look into the science behind that, but those two elements have a massive link in the way in which we look at the lives and how we look at ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so you are basically touching on all of those touch points in just one simple 60-second exercise, which literally takes nothing from you. It's absolutely free. Mm-hmm. You're not contorting or doing any sort of hyperventilation, so you won't look weird when you're doing the process. Right. And you can do it anywhere.
Right.
Right. And so that, I kind of coined that as like the flagship breathing technique.
Right.
And it's so powerful in helping you just also understand where certain emotions are stored within the body. There's a lot. There's so much power in that, and that's literally just by breathing.
Right. Talk a little bit about like how this can help men that, from triggers from past relationships. How can this help regulate that? You touched a little bit upon it, but I'm thinking of a situation where maybe a guy is triggered and they just start seeing red. Like, what is something like that should be for them to be assigned to be like 4-7-8. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of any clients that you've run into or any.
Yeah. So, I actually have a client that went through something very similar to that. I won't mention him by name, but what I will say is before we started working together, he's very stereotypical, logical, masculine brain, where any form of emotional engagement or connection from his partner was met with just a very rational, logical, systematic response. And he thought that was just him being, masculine. But as we continued to work together, what we later discovered was that that's actually a defense mechanism that he had built from his childhood. And especially when it comes to intimate connections, which is, I mean, if you look at any relationship between a man and a woman, the feminine energy is primarily driven by that. She's looking for the intimacy. She's looking for that, an element of vulnerability. And this is what we were working on. And so we used 478, and another terminology that I use for it is, I call it, it's a nervous system purge. Mm-hmm. So when you're feeling stressed, you're carrying all that pent up energy. What's happening from a chemical level within the body? The cortisol levels are rising and rising and spiking. Another thing is, he was a massive caffeine addict. So again, cortisol is through the roof. And so he was constantly amped all the time. So whenever, whenever he'd be asked to switch from that very logical, pragmatic brain and connect with his emotions, it was just shut down immediately. And the more that his partner asked for, the more he would push back and then get explosive. With the breath, what we worked on was, when he could feel like that surge of energy that's like rising from the core. Yep. Because that's where we start to feel it. When we start to get activated and we start to get a little bit emotionally reactive, we start to feel that like little burst of energy that's starting to make its way up through the core. And it literally is like this fireball that's working its way up until it hits the throat, and then blah, it comes out. Right. And with that comes the brain fog, and then the thoughts of limiting beliefs, or we start to hear things that maybe aren't actually necessarily being spoken. We start to look for reasons to validate our behavior. Mm-hmm. The breath served as a means to essentially create that disconnect before that fireball reached its outlet. And through that, I just said to him very quickly, you can either remove yourself, or just, even if you're in the moment, just say, listen, I'm going to take a moment to pause, because communication is also key. And this is another big factor when it comes to speaking to our feminine counterparts, is being able to communicate effectively with them and just tell them, listen, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to leave the room or go for a walk, or just can we have a moment of quiet for a second? I just need to work through something before I choose my next words. And more often than not, I think any partner that's supportive and understands you will understand that, because the idea is to have a conversation, or for them to be understood by you, and not to get into a reactive shouting match. And so with that, to just set the tone, to basically create containment within that given experience. And I said, listen, just do 2 cycles. Just breathe for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, and just see how you feel. And I mean, he said to me, it felt literally like the pressure gauge was being depressed. And funnily enough, he did this, I think, twice in the presence of his partner, and now they both do it together as their own way of self-regulating. So yeah, I set the standard.
Setting the standard, and the spouse is following the lead. Sounds like, kind of, if you will.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. That's brilliant. I love that. You've seen life and death decisions in the military. So how has that shaped your ability to spot real versus performative leadership in the coaching world?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few conversations like this. And, one thing I will say is, so by no measure or standard would I say that I am like the coach to go for, or claim that I know everything there is to know on, somatic wellness, healing, whatever it is. So that would actually lead to my first point, which is, someone who is truly an authentic coach versus performative will accept the fact that, they don't know it all. I can't remember who said this. It was a philosopher. I don't know if it was Aristotle or if it was Socrates, but he said, the only thing that I know in life is that I know nothing at all, or something along those lines, right? And the reason why I say that is because humility and being humble about your trade, your profession, or just even your stance and position in life speaks volumes compared to the person who will always, they'll interject, or they have, the playbook, or they have something because they know that they take this they take this sort of dynamic, which is they know better because you're coming in as a client, and therefore there's nothing for them to learn from you, and they just give you the answers. I believe, and in my experience with a few people who I've worked with in the past like this, that actually that's a great sign that they themselves probably don't actually, one, have that level of faith within themselves. Therefore, they need to project. We can go down the psychological rabbit hole, but we'll save that for later.
That's the next podcast.
Yeah, for the for the next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's humility, the understanding that they don't know everything. Mm-hmm. One thing I'll also say is and without this sounding too esoteric, but I think you can also get a feel for a person, even remotely, when you're listening to the words that they use. When, for example, okay, let's just take this for example, like coaching people on somatic wellness, using clinical terminology to also help raise awareness. For me, the way that I think about it is, if I can take a complex situation and explain it to a 5-year-old, then that is what I consider to be success. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way.
No.
I just think of it as, keep it simple, keep it straightforward, so that way everyone across the board understands. There's no need to create some sort of exclusivity for hyper intellectualists or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed is, for the performative coaches out there, this also goes to confirm that they probably don't actually know what they're talking about, is they'll drop the buzzwords. They'll use highfalutin language. They'll use very, what's the word? Like, they'll use like the certain jargon that only people within that field would know or learn. And they'll be dropping, the terminologies, the buzzwords, and just expect you to just sort of jump onto their level and get it. Patience is is something that goes without question. Mm-hmm. I think any good coach has patience, because a good coach will meet the client where they are, as opposed to expecting them to meet the coach where they are. Because when you think about it, the whole reason why someone is coming to you for coaching is because they're trying to get from where they are, point A, to point B. Even if that coach is at point D or E, it's the coach's responsibility to come back, to not hold their hand and pull them through it, but to show them how to navigate the next step, as opposed to expecting them to figure it out and sort of meet them on their level because, you consider yourself to be a high value coach, or whatever the terminology is. So those are a few hallmarkers that I've seen. And pulling on my experience in the military, when I've worked with various team leaders and senior clinicians, they'll almost have like a nonchalant attitude. They don't try too hard. I feel like coaches and good leaders, they set a standard, but they don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. Right. They also don't need to be the one who's always seen to be leading the charge. Right. And like we learned this as well within like team leadership courses, which is, yeah, you might be the leader, but you have a team for a reason. And one principle around effective leadership is being able to identify the strengths and areas of improvement of the members within your team, and then being able to respectively, let them take point on certain projects or tasks or whatever. And good coaches and good leaders also use a similar strategy. Like with coaches, it's a little bit more, I say, niche, because they are essentially like multiple touch points all in one. But it's the way that they show up. They are good coaches are also willing to be coached. Like there's so many things that I learn daily when I speak to my own clients,
Mhm.
where it's like, oh, I've learned something new today. Even like before we started this podcast, you mentioned you were mentioning just a little bit about your background,
Mhm.
and for example, like a lot more women are not going in for their checkups. I didn't know that. I didn't know that, and I've done 7 years
Mhm.
in the like A&E trauma
Mhm.
field.
Mhm.
So you know every day's a school day is
Yeah.
essentially what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I think those are the main areas that I've noticed around good leadership and good coaches versus the performative.
Yeah, I like the way I understand really good leaders, and this is just from listening to people like yourself that were in the military, where they've been exposed to leaders that may not be that good and leaders that are
Mm.
really good.
Yeah.
And it seems to be this consensus where a good leader will take accountability if their team fails.
Yeah.
Like their failure is the leader's failure.
Yeah.
But a good leader will also say the team success or an individual success is their success. Like they don't take credit for it. The leader doesn't take credit. It's like this person who's under my leadership
Mhm.
has done really, really well. Like here's all the credit to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just to kind of go back a little bit, you were you were talking about you know, being addressing the patient or the client as a, talk to them like they're 5 years old or, so they understand what's going on. I have a background in healthcare, and when I go see my healthcare provider, I'm like, just talk to me like I'm five. I just go
Yeah.
ahead. And I'm like, I kind of get what you're saying, but just talk to me because talk to me like I'm five because I'm still a little nervous about what you might tell me, So
Yeah.
talking to me like I'm five gives me a little more clarity, makes me relax a little more. And they're like, oh, okay. And they laugh. And then we kind of just like talk about whatever. So,
It also like breaks that human. Well, it doesn't break it. It establishes that human connection, right?
mhm.
Because like yeah, especially like going into the doctor's office. I mean that one in itself, especially if you've been called in
Mhm.
for hey, you need to come have a checkup. I mean, naturally, that within itself, based off what we know and how we perceive the modern conventional, you've been summoned by the doctor.
Right.
That seems a little ominous, right? So
Mhm.
just by recognizing that, hey doc, you're speaking to a human being at the end of the day. Yeah, sure, I may be in the same field as you and understand all the Latin terminology, but I'm not here as that. I'm here as a person, as a being.
Right.
So just explain it to me in a way that takes up less of my cognitive function so I can digest what you're telling me, which then leads to taking informed action, right? Because otherwise, it can be very daunting. And I've, I've seen this with some doctors who use their, they've like usually the junior doctors who come straight out of med school, and then they'll be dropping all the terminology bombs and the Latin terminologies, and it's just like, look, like, hey, dude, like, I get it, like. You're proud that you graduated, you got your degree and everything, happy for you too. But here, when we work, we just speak like normal people because we're dealing with normal people.
Yeah.
So why don't we just kind of get on that as a baseline?
Yeah. And it's I like the approach of it's not dumbing down the patient. It's just talking to
No.
them so they understand where you're coming from. Because I've done that. Like, oh yeah, I'm in the healthcare field, blah blah blah, and you can kind of see a click. Like, oh okay, I'm going to say these really technical and maybe complicated terms to you, and I'm like,
Yeah.
right now I'm a little nervous about what you're going to tell me. I'm not going to be fully comprehending everything. Just talk to me like I'm five. Just talk to me like I'm
Yeah.
five, and then we can go from there. And that's always like what you did. You get a little bit of a laugh. They're like, oh, okay, and then they start looking at you as, oh, just treat them like just a person who wants to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You often speak about systems that work under fire. How can men apply that mindset when evaluating a coach's credentials or methodology?
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, so no, that's a strong argument there, because the truth of the matter is, yeah, in this digital day and age, you really don't know who is who, and you know, basically, are you who you say you are? So the first, there's also, like, I think there's a way to approach it with tact, right? You don't ever want to go into a situation guns blazing, just like, hey, so I'm gonna basically put you in the hot seat and hotspot you, because that also can be very off-putting from a coaching perspective. I mean, I've been in that position before where, like, yeah, sure. I mean, I was completely transparent with the other person, but I just felt very reluctant to want to work with them, because it's like this. You feel as though you're having to prove yourself, prove your worth. I think I think in this case, when it comes to verifying, so first things first, what kind of coach do they say they are, right? Because a lot of people in the coaching space don't have any form of formal credentials. So there are ways to also confirm the knowledge with them by just simply doing something like this, just have a conversation with them. And while you're speaking to them, going back to what we spoke about in the previous point, just observe and listen out for how they hold themselves. What sort of energy do they show up with? Do they hold space for you when you're giving your part, or are they just trying to listen to respond? Are they listening to understand, or are they just going to be like, yeah, okay, perfect. It's your turn's over. Now I'm going to go and send. And they just try and steer the conversation down the direction of a sale. I think one good way to verify, let's say like a coach that's worth their salt, is to also assess for how desperate they come across. Because if someone claims that they are so busy or that they are in high demand, they won't be desperate to make sales, and they won't use these pushy sales tactics. And I feel as though like some of the stuff I say here may piss some other people who are coaches off. But like one thing that I've observed when I've looked at other coaches like landing pages is they create this like fake urgency for sales. One of them being that fake countdown clock timer thing, which I'll never understand. It's like you get on the landing page and it's like, okay, there's 23 hours because for this limited offer to last, and then once it's done, prices go up by like 200% or whatever. But then if you just hit refresh, the clock resets, and it's like, do people like? Yeah, I mean, not to sound hateful. I mean, I get it on one end, but it also just comes across as fake and disingenuous. Another thing is also like the concept of coaches who work with cohorts. If they create more time pressure, as in, hey, there's only 2 slots available, better like get them while they last. In my experience, because I've also made the mistake and learned the hard way, gone into groups like that, and it's like a barren wasteland. The coach themselves actually took forever to engage with the group. So it's the fake urgency, and you can hear that in the vocal tonality. You can hear that just by the way that they carry themselves with the conversation. What kind of terminology are they using? And there's one thing here, and this is a little bit more on the psychological element, but I think a good coach will also be assessing you to see whether you are a good fit for what they have to offer. And a good way is to also listen to the way that they ask questions. Now, this is something that I actually covered in a video on how to vet a therapist via the appropriate channels and looking at the licensing. But there is a terminology that I think that all coaches, especially in a self-development or well-being space should adopt, which is Socratic questioning.
Mm.
And I'll just quickly, just very briefly explain what Socratic questioning essentially is. A tool that is used to essentially create open-ended questioning for the other person to make conclusions on. So if you are, if you are trying to figure out, well, why am I in this call? Instead of the coach trying to sell themselves and kind of lead you down the funnel, they would, in a way, like mirror it back to you and say, okay, well, why are you here? Like, tell me, what is your problem? Okay, you've told me what your problem is. Have you thought about maybe where it first occurred from? Like, how did you get here? How did you get there, first of all? And it's about giving them the ability to come to decisions themselves. So that way, it also in a way, it kind of protects you from ever being accused of, well, this person just manipulated me and pushed me down this pathway. And I find that, like, with the people that I've spoken to, yes, the caveat is, oh, well, it gives people the opportunity to walk away. Well, yeah, sure, because I couldn't think of anything worse than using sales psychology on an individual to just make a sale, to get them into my program, and then they don't connect with it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in the worst case scenario, that could lead to like cashback requests, refund requests, and maybe even negative testimonials, or they could leave like a Trustpilot review on you or whatever. And that's actually more damaging than just like the $2,000 sign up. It's I think that's a really good way to also kind of test under fire. It's not too aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a good way to, I call it like scanning. You're scanning for proof that they actually are who they say they are, because they have done the work to get them to that level where they can take you through to the next step. And one thing I will add very quickly before I round my points off is, like, a good coach doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's literally walked to the other end of the spectrum. They just need to be maybe like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. Mm-hmm. And from that, I find that actually that can be more effective than finding a coach who's 10 years down the road compared to someone who's been like 2 years down the road, because the information and the methodology that they have is fresher, it's more current, and they can actually give you more useful information for you to apply at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to kind of recap. So just like some red flags people can look for when vetting a coach or a therapist that they're interested in working with. It was desperation. Mm-hmm. And please let me know if I'm missing something. Desperation, a time pressure, and then the Socratic questions, like lacking.
Yeah, I would say like those are like the 3 main areas to assess, because on the larger side of things, it also shows you a lot about their character. If they're not desperate, and if they're quite open to receive and almost a little bit nonchalant, it shows you that when things get tough for you, say you do sign up in and enter the coaching program, they're not going to get flaky on you. They're not going to then start panicking and think, okay, well, you know what, this doesn't work. They're going to pull the plug and just leave you high and dry, right? They may give you a partial refund, but if anything, I and this is just maybe my belief system here, which is once you commit to a task, see it through, right? Unless, of course, you have literally reached and exhausted all options, right? In which case, then you would look at closing the process down and maybe passing them on to another coach, or in some cases, maybe, listen, this is beyond my ability. So that's also it, like being humble and honest and just upfront enough. It tells you a lot about their character. Those are the 3 main elements, more than actually coaching expertise. But the irony is, it's substance of character and coaching expertise that marry up together. Because especially when you're looking at, I personally dislike the term because of how stigmatized it is now. But when you look at like life coaches, for example, mm-hmm. it is using their life, their life experience, and whatever they've sort of professionally done
Mhm.
along the way that give them the qualifying markers. And you can't fake authenticity. You know, you can hold the mask up maybe and do it well to a degree, but then eventually it's going to slip. And then guess what? It's going to just bite you in the ass later on down the line. Especially if you make a good name for yourself, you have a whole sort of like portfolio of clients underneath you. That can become a very slippery slope, right? So I think as first principles, it's just about getting to understand who you're speaking to,
Right.
not necessarily what kind of credentials that stand behind them. Unless, of course, it is in like a professional capacity, like you're talking to a therapist or a counselor or psychologist, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. You remind me that accountability is very important in this
Yeah.
field. And if someone's not going to take accountability, that should be like another flag. It's like, whoop, let's call that
Oh,
one
yeah.
out too. Um, I was reminded of a conversation I had with Paul Bauer, and one of the things he's another coach out there, and one of the things he said is, if someone is interested in me being their coach, and what I would suggest they do is, he's like, go look at my videos. He's like, I've got some material on my website that you can download for free. You can go through that. If you're really interested, you can go through my books. He's got some books. And if you're still interested, give me a call and we can set something up. If you're not interested, then that's great too. That's fine. Like, he was just like, here's stuff. If you want to look at it, great. And if you want me to help you, great. If not, great. And
Yeah.
just that kind of approach in general, I was like, that's refreshing. That's nice to see. Like, it's like, hey, if you like my stuff, great. If not, okay. And I've seen a few really good coaches that are like that, like yourself. I mean, it's taking accountability is really good, as well as here's things that you can do to verify who I am and what I say. And, if you're comfortable with it, we can go forward. If you're not, that's fine too. There's no there's no timer. There's no ticker,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. There's
So,
there's no countdown clock. It's the way I also look at it too is as as a coach, yeah, you may not be held accountable to like us to the same level that say a therapist would be because they have studied, clinical guidelines in accordance with the whatever the respective country's law is, and so by law they are held to a certain standard. But you have a duty, and that's where I think that we kind of touched a little bit on like the stigma of, oh, I'm a coach. That's where things have gone a bit awry in the digital age because there is very little repercussions apart from perhaps like you getting absolutely torn apart on social media. But there's nothing so much so in the way of legality. So a good coach will actually understand that, but still take the role seriously, because it's just also my personal belief that your reputation is the most important thing out of anything you'll ever gain in life, out of any material element. It's your rep that precedes you. There's a reason why that is an expression. And especially when you're using social media, I mean, man, it's so easy for people to just find things out about you.
mhm.
And this is, well, I say this with full confidence because, again, if you are truly who you say you are and you're transparent, you should actually be okay and encourage people. And I'm guessing this is what Paul probably means when he says, yeah, like, here's some of my material on my website, watch some of my videos on social media, whatever it is. If you want to, do your research, pull out the magnifying glass. I've got nothing to hide.
Right.
I am who I say I am. And it's more for you to see whatever you feel
Yeah.
is digestible and agreeable, and see if maybe we could be a fit. Right. So a good coach will also not shy away. If anything, they'll lean into the accountability, because this is where I believe that this whole like scrutiny aspect can actually serve in a coach's favor. If you truly are authentic and say who you are and you've got nothing to hide and you operate within ethical guidelines,
Mhm.
when people do their verification checks on you and they see that it all checks out, it's only going to lead to like stellar reports on, okay, this guy is actually one of the good ones. So you know what? You, go to him if you're struggling with whatever, or go to her if you need some help with that. And it actually just makes your life so much easier.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's a big reason why accountability is so important, because you're just saying, yeah, this is who I am. Go check it out. And, if I'm doing something you don't like, that's fine too, but it's out there and there's a reason why it's out there versus,
Yeah.
oh, just trust me. Just trust. I'm a therapist. Just trust me. And that was
Yeah.
another thing I was thinking about is if someone really is claiming they're a therapist, they shouldn't have any problem saying, this is where I went to school. Here's my license number. If I'm retired, you can always check it out. This is what my old license number is. Looking that stuff up takes, like you said, if you're a internet sleuth, which I think everybody is, it takes minutes, if not
seconds. Yeah.
seconds. Yeah.
And to just add on that as well,
Mm-hmm.
if you truly have done the time and put the work in, remember we spoke about this on your first call. One of the first things I noticed was in your backdrop. I was like, oh yeah, I can see.
Well, yeah, it's not shown here, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not there, but like the thing is, when you go through that struggle, because it is a struggle when you're going through med school, for myself to get that foundation degree, especially at the time that we were being trained, we had a condensed course. So what would normally take 3 to 4 years, we had to do in one. So like by week 4, we had our first pass or fail tests, and the stress levels were like through the roof, right? So you best believe when I did pass my course, I got my certification and everything like that. That went up in a frame. Well, now it's in a folder, but I mean, even just the verification of, oh, I actually did serve in the military. I have my pass off parade photo framed on the wall because it's a hallmark of achievement. It's something that I'm proud of. So for anyone that makes a claim like that, it's like, it's a no-brainer because it's something that you put the time, you put the blood, sweat, and tears in for, and proud to have that achievement under your belt, right?
Yeah.
And most people, most professionals, most clinical professionals I know have it mounted on their walls, or they'll have have it framed and on their desks or something, because again, it's a hallmark of achievement. So again, it's like, you can't fool people now, man. You just can't fool people.
I had a preceptor who once said, I'm like, why don't you have your stuff, your degrees and your licensure and all that kind of stuff up in your office? He's like, I don't need to brag about it. I know what I did. But he says that, he's like, I don't need to brag. He's like, but I got it up in my office at my home. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I still remind myself of the sacrifice of the dedication to earn that piece of paper. It's not just handed to you. You earn it. You work hard.
Yep.
And I think
exactly.
I think a few people take that for granted. Yeah. You mentioned your mother's influence in breathwork and mindfulness. How can family lineage and cultural wisdom play a role in authentic coaching?
So it's funny. I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I think that now what's happening, especially with the current state that we're in, where everything is just extremely polarized, people are just so done with social media as well. We're actually leaning more into like the ways of old, where people are starting to be more communally focused. Families are starting to integrate a bit more. I think that in terms of familial lineage, and I suppose, yeah, even like cultural integration as well, I think that plays a massive part, because it's like, how do I explain? It's almost like, imagine having a family heirloom that's passed down through the generations, except that this heirloom is knowledge and principles to help serve others. And when we look at specifically applying this to like the coaching space, in a way, it's like it brings a refreshing new methodology to the space, because not everything is so clinical and it's not so conventional, like, for example, since the pandemic, over the last 5 years, there's been a 300% increase in breathwork coaching and training. I mean, who would have thought that the one thing that human beings have had since the first man existed on the earth now has become like a I don't want to say like just monetized, but it's become like a conventional practice. It's like you have to be taught how to use your breath again.
Yeah.
But you know, with that being said, it's kind of like people staying in and choosing to have a home cooked meal instead of going out to a restaurant for a $200 dinner, you know?
Right.
Um, if that analogy makes sense, I think
Yeah,
it's
100%.
like it's just like this new holistic and just it just feels connected
There's a there's a
approach.
lot. Yeah, I mean, my girlfriend is Brazilian and she loves to cook. I feel very fortunate to be with her. She loves to cook,
Yeah.
and what you just said, it's a difference between, this is nice and being treated well versus a real human connection, if you will.
Yeah.
Like you just said, that
Yeah.
there's like some love and some interaction when doing something for someone you love in a home environment. And it's not, she doesn't just love cooking for me. She'll cook for dozens of people at a time. Like
Yeah.
she's got a table where you can sit like 15 people. And she's like,
Amazing.
no big deal. She's like cooks everything and she'll have friends come over and they bring, and it's just amazing. It's better than, in my opinion, better than any kind of $200 plate or $500 plate meal a person can
100%.
have. I mean, those are nice. Don't get me wrong. 500. I mean, not like I've done those. I'm just saying those are kind of
I
really
was gonna
nice.
say,
But I think being at home with a bunch of friends and family, where a few people are cooking, a few people are chatting, and everyone's together in one room. I think it's just a really great binding experience. But yeah.
that's it. That's it. It's about building that sense of belonging and community, which is like so odd because like what I've noticed over the years is again since the pandemic, everyone was in isolation. Then what
Yes.
people were seeking was groups, places to belong. And so that's where, for example, these like online communities started to surface. And that's where we started to see, various influencers and figures that were leading the charge in certain movements. And, they got in, they had their sort of rise to notoriety and whatever.
Mhm.
And then what happened is it started to become like factions in this like spiritual and psychological war, because that's what I see. I
Mhm.
see it's like spiritual and psychological warfare between different groups who buy into an ideology of the like the first leader, the thought leader
Mhm.
of that movement. And
Mhm.
then there's the classic, battle of the sexes, the gender wars, and that's where we tap into
Mhm.
the, let's just say, like less what's the right word to use? I was just trying to think of something that kind of goes in line with below
Mhm. Mhm.
lowbrow arguments, and
Yeah.
it keeps people polarized, right? And then it just became the controversy war where everything was, oh my God, controversial outrage here, there, and everywhere.
Yep.
And now people are just so sick of it,
Mhm.
so sick of it. And what we're seeing, like also what I see with a lot of this is also what I've seen with a lot of men that I've spoken to,
Mhm.
some of the men who I've worked with, where there's like this like resignation from, well, why do I bother? I'm not going to put myself out there because damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that is the answer. I can understand why they feel that way, but this is again why, for me, it's like going back to like that home recipe approach, which is yes, I served in the military, but I'm not out here speaking as though I'm Jocko Willink or David Goggins or
Mhm.
everything is just like hardcore tactical about everything, because I also bring in I guess the emotional component there too. And that's where integration takes place, because that's what we actually need as men and women. We've
Mhm.
got hyper masculine females, we've also got hyper feminine females, and then we've got the wounded hyper masculine male bravado, and then we've got men who are just kind of like quitting and giving up on it, and there's kind of like they're just floating in the void. What
Right.
we need is we need to harness masculine and feminine polarity to integrate that together
Mhm.
and that's what I call the whole individual. Like that's what sovereignty is in a way. It's being able to lean into both of those spaces as and when it serves and when it's needed,
Mm-hmm.
but also being comfortable with being able to step back as well. And that's what leads to that tight knit bond and that community.
Yeah.
Because when I was thinking back to, sorry, it just brought up a thought about when I was working within my clinical teams. It just brought us back to, we had men and women who were all on the ground with a common goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we all had different strengths and areas of improvement. I don't like using the term weakness, but we had areas to improve on, but we just completely focused on leaning in on our strengths. And when one person was struggling, everybody else came together. And what that is essentially, it's community, right? And that's one thing that's taught in the military when we go through basic. It's like the brotherhood, so to speak. And that's how men thrive. We build brotherhood, but we use the same principles of being able to help one another in a wider community. It doesn't have to be segregated, and that is, I believe that's where we're heading. We're not quite there yet, but I believe that's where we're heading.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Rollo Tomasi, where he's talking about, we work together. Men and women work better together than apart. And I believe he brought up a study where they looked at the MRIs of men and women, and the brain, MRIs of the brain,
Yeah.
and where for men it lights up a certain area, and for women it lights up a certain area, but not for both. There's areas that are brighter than others.
Yeah.
And he said if you overlay it, everything's lit up. And his whole point was just like we're better together than apart. To try and do this clash all the time is just not good for us.
No.
But going back to what you mentioned earlier about giving up, about men just giving up, you think of all of the things men are shamed for so much, and they don't, what areas do they have to find or seek out help? And this leads into one of my questions about someone you talked to me about, Dr. K, aka the Healthy Gamer.
Yeah.
One of his quotes is, "Talk therapy is the gold standard. Talk therapy is the gold standard for women."
Yeah.
70% of 70% of psychiatric patients historically are women, and 70% of psychiatrists and therapists historically have been women. Men don't talk. And then he adds, except for the podcast bros. and then I didn't know he was on with other people. And all these other guys start cracking up, and they're like, yeah. And it was like, men now are using podcasts to address the issues we are going through.
Yeah.
Let's speak a little bit about why is it important for men to have a space to talk?
Oh, man.
You have these guys withdrawing. They're shamed about, just like, I saw there was one influencer shaming men about going to the gym. And I just thought, that is the last vestige of where a guy can find an antidepressant without taking an antidepressant. I mean, it is like, that's where we get better.
Yep. Oh, dude. I mean, woo. How much time do we have? Because like this is
you have all the time. You have all the time in the world, my friend. You have all the time in the world.
The reason why I say this is because I up until a couple of months ago, I've done podcast production with a group of friends of mine. Started off as a passion project. We started then to move into kind of like getting, like therapists, coaches, specialists in the wellness field. So, dude, especially when it comes to men's mental health, there's something about it which maybe the guys can relate to here, when something about sitting here with a microphone. The microphone actually is like, it's not even like an amplifier to just push our problems out into the world. It's almost like in talk therapy where they would hold a doll. Like I'm holding the doll and I'm speaking with the doll. The microphone serves like a similar purpose. And I think that there's also an element where maybe it is just like a bit of like the boy within, but it's when you're talking with your boys, especially when I think about like gamers.
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, the majority of my wellness talks have been when I used to game with my old group of gaming buddies. Like even with my army boys, like every now and then we might get together.
Mhm.
If it's not a phone call, if we're just screwing around playing just playing a game like mindlessly, but we'll use that as a buffer. It's a buffer, that's the word. It's a buffer to essentially feel safe enough to speak about our problems without feeling as though I'm now going to get cut down because of it. And a lot of men, so many men, have said that, they've tried opening up to their partners, for example, and then they got judged. And, I think fundamentally that comes down to a lack of education. I think it comes down to a lack of education and also emotional maturity. Because, and you know what, very quickly, what I will touch on this is segueing off that very quickly, the lack of emotional maturity, speaking from my own personal experience, it comes from choosing partners from scarcity. It comes from choosing from our, traumas or the insecurities, right? As opposed to actually listening deep down inside. And that's why the cycle of finding, for example, partners that exhibit the same similar behaviors, because we are mirrors. We mirror each other. And similarly, when we're in podcasts or when we're in a Discord group or whatever it is, we're mirroring each other, right? So I think that's really important for guys because, like you said, by nature, we're not big talkers. It's actually a skill that men have to learn. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why women are like, men just don't talk, because like ladies who are listening to this, from the time we came out of the womb, we were conditioned into kind of like stiff up. I mean, in British culture too, stiff upper lip. Don't show the world weakness because it will be exploited. And the concept is like big boys don't cry. We may have emotions, but you are the more emotional ones. And I'm using air quotes here because that isn't necessarily true. Women are more emotionally forward facing, but that doesn't mean that they are the more emotionally reactive ones. I've met plenty of reactive males, but that within itself is a testament to why there needs to be an outlet. And yeah, like Dr. K, I make a joke. I call him like my uncle from overseas.
Mhm.
He has a good point about like, the podcast bros, because yeah, it's kind of like, even the term echo chamber I hate because it has a negative connotation, but it creates that to a certain degree where more men can listen to what's being said and be like, you know what, man, I felt the same way too. And actually, what I will say from my experience, even before I did wellness podcast production with my group of friends, before that, I used to lead lecture talks in a male self development community, and that effectively was basically just like a live podcast with like a digital stage to invite people to come on and give their pieces. And I still remember some of the comments when I was covering certain points. We covered like some pretty deep stuff too, like how to deal with loss, battling depression, male loneliness, fighting porn addictions, things like that. These are real issues that the part that bamboozles me is that there's so much, like there's academic literature on this. There's also so much information on social media that builds awareness, but it's still classed as taboo subjects because socially we have bought into this toxic mentality that men's voices only deserve to be heard when we are either issuing commands or we're speaking from an authoritative lens. And that's one of the reasons why we've got this whole like masculinity is aggression, misguided logic going out there. And so I'm trying to also articulate in a way in which people can follow my train of thought, because I want them to see just how these like points loop back on each other, and it's like a house of cards.
Mhm.
right? They loop back on each other and they just completely crash at whatever level, which then leads men specifically, leaves them in the same place that they left off, which is, well, I'm kind of screwed if I do, screwed if I don't. So you know what? F it. I'm just not going to talk.
Right. Right.
Or for those who are bold enough to speak about their problems, they'll get on a podcast or they'll record a video, whatever it is. And there's nuance too, right? It also depends on how they lead the argument, right? And that's the onus is on the individual there. But then even then, you could be having a legitimate conversation with your boys about real issues, and there'll be someone in the comments, often other men who are acting from a place of fear because again, we mirrors, right? We are mirrors. So they see something that's very real and it scares them because it means that they have to then be vulnerable and open up themselves. And so they'll leave a comment like, don't be a pussy, bro. Like, not up. Nobody cares. Work harder. But that guy will literally go to bed that night up at 3 a.m. ruminating about why he up his relationship or why he can't go 3 days without hitting the bottle or why his life is a train wreck, right? And this is like deep stuff. And so just kind of, to sort of like come back to the question why it's so important, apart from the obvious answer, which is it gives them a creative outlet. It is like our own version of talk therapy, but also when it's done correctly, it serves as a message to help collectively other men recognize what's happening beneath the surface. Because so many of us, I mean, even myself, up until the point where I sought out the help of a therapist, I stuffed everything down inside because I just thought, well, no, I mean, I'm a soldier, I'm a medic. So it's my job to do the fixing. I don't get fixed because people need me. And if I can't be there for them, well, then what use am I? Right. And then take that same narrative and attach it to all the other departments of your life. And you've got a wonderful recipe for running headfirst into a wall and crashing. And sometimes it takes seeing someone else talk about their issue and be really open and transparent and be like, yeah, dude, today I thought about taking my own life. Or like, you know what? I'm not doing that well. Like I'm in financial crisis because I took out this loan, whatever it is, having relationship struggles or whatever. And I'm just not in the greatest space right now. And it actually allows us to connect as humans again and reconnect with empathy, which is what I believe has been lost over the years, especially with the polarization of social media. It gives us the opportunity to be empathic once again and stitch together the community again.
Yeah. It's incredibly, incredibly important, I believe, for men to have a few, like an inner circle or a close group of friends to talk about the deepest things that might be just traumatizing that you're going through or whatnot. And these are not just like friends that are going to be flippant or not take you seriously. Guys that'll just step in for you for what, just, I don't know how else to say it other than like, they'll take a bullet for you type of guy. Metaphor. 100%. I mean, but those kind of guys that are like, whatever you need, buddy, I'm here. Just have to say, there's a friend of mine. He does very well for himself, but he was going through a divorce. His father died. He has a daughter that I think she was a teenager, plus, high earning business. And he was balancing all of that stuff. And there was a few of us sitting around. It was like couples date night type of thing. And he's just coming clean with all of this stuff. And his wife was like, whoa, like, I don't think she really, like his current wife at that time. It's like when I was going through my previous, when I was getting divorced previously, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, whoa. And my first question was like, did you have guys, I hope you had somebody to talk to and help you through it. He's like, yeah, oh yeah. And he was saying some of his closest friends or, some guys that helped him through the whole thing. Yeah. So I just think it's just incredibly important where here's a man showing some vulnerability. And my question to you would be, how does a man approach being vulnerable to his spouse, his girlfriend, his wife, his woman, because I've started coming under the terms of I'm not going to cry in front of my girlfriend saying, I'm dealing with this good. It's like, this is
Mm,
something I'm struggling with. And just kind of leaving it at
yeah.
that and just, like that's it. And then kind of walking away and then really kind of unloading on my buddies.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And without, I guess, projecting my own process into this, because this is also something that I've done a lot of work on myself in my previous relationships. Um, I do believe there is like almost like a protocol in a way, because like there's something also biologically that speaks to our partners when we as men are in crisis, especially when you are in, for lack of a better term, like traditional gender rolled dynamics, where your woman is essentially looking to you for support, stability, and knowing that, hey, like he's got this. There's, even if we may not be in the right place now, there's momentum, right? And I think this also kind of loops back to the direction, not the direction, the understanding where actually a lot of women say that, he doesn't need to be a made man as long as he's got drive and purpose
Mm-hmm.
and he makes me feel safe, then that's enough for me. And as long as I know that he's working towards something, he's working towards his goal, right? And that's sort of like is the real counter argument to the whole like don't be a bum on one end of the spectrum, and then you need to be a 6'4", six-figure earning, Ferrari driving, like multi quintillionaire lifestyle. It's just too polar. It's just more polarization that keeps people stuck in those zones. With the approaching the dynamic with your partner, your spouse, I think one, the way I think of it, right, is like almost as if you're briefing your troops in a way, where you say, "Hey guys, listen, this is what's happened. So be completely authentic and honest and transparent because women also can see through bullshit. They've got amazing X-ray bullshit detectors. Don't lie to her, but then also don't like dress it up and make it exaggerate because then that also she sees that as, oh, okay, he's being super dramatic about this. But like speak authentically from the heart, but also the have the clear understanding and purpose of knowing where you're going to go from there. So solutions based mentality and being able to say, look, things aren't that great right now, but I have a plan. And this is where we're going to go. And then also just be open and honest. And if you actually need something in the form of support, just say, yeah, you know what, I could use you being around a bit more now, or I could use, if you're the type of person who kind of recovers more in solitude, just be like, look, babe, I just need like each day, I just need like 15 minutes or whatever
Mm-hmm.
to myself. It's nothing to do with you. It just allows me to sit with my thoughts or go vent to the guys or whatever it is and strategize. And so that way you are another terminology, you're creating a contained environment because I mean, I'm 31 years old, so I'm no expert in life by any stretch of the imagination. But from what I've learned in my relationships, from my first relationship to my my most recent one, which is women across the board look for a degree of safety when they are with their man. And the way in which you can do that, especially when you are dealing with crisis or setbacks or frustrations or disappointments or whatever it may be, is to create containment, a contained environment. And that simply is just by establishing the boundaries, a secure perimeter, being like, right, this is where we're at. This is what I'm thinking about. And then also kind of have the conversation with her understand where she's at, and then just say, right, so this is what I need to do in order to move forward. This is how we can move together. So there's inclusion. And so that way, she doesn't feel as though, oh, he doesn't talk to me or he's only focusing on himself. So I wonder, like, where do I fit into that picture? Because women do think about the collective, right? Because they're nurturers. You know, they also, when they make a lot of their decisions, especially when it comes to long-term relationships, they think about the collective partnership. And so that's where we as men need to also do a little bit better to mirror that, because we can get stuck in our own worlds as we do. But when it comes to this, especially because it is something that does affect both of you, if you think about it. Mm. If you fall into financial ruin, it's going to affect her. If you fall into a mental dark hole, it's definitely going to affect her, right? You'll just start showing up differently and she's going to notice that. So it can also be really helpful to have this almost like consultation type of, or like briefing type of discussion with your partner, because she could also bring something from her own intuition to fill in a gap which there might have been oversight on your part. Because for us guys, I know with me, I try to get hyper logical about things whenever I feel as though I'm at an impasse. And more often than not, there's something intuitively that needs to be addressed. And oh, funny enough, I do that, and all of a sudden that great chasm starts to just become a small gap. You know what I mean? Right. A lot of it is just a feeling, right? A feeling. And hey, I mean, if you use that in conjunction with, for example, that nervous system reset, both people are doing that, like my one client and his partner do, it can actually build a formidable partnership where, you know, that becomes like the go-to, like, hey, look, okay, let's take a quick rest. Let's do the breath, purge that adrenaline, that cortisol from our bodies, our systems, get rid of all that stuck energy that makes us irrational. And let's start thinking a bit pragmatically. Let's lean in, right? Mm-hmm. Lean in on my strengths, lean in on your strengths. And then together we come together and we move forward, whatever that looks like. Right. But yeah, that's how I would see it, and that's how I would do it as well.
No, I think that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Just to have how you described having it in a contained environment, and then you're being inclusive. You know, when talking about vulnerabilities with your woman, keep it in a contained environment, keep it inclusive, but it sounds like we don't get emotional. We don't need to be like, oh my God, everything. It's like, this is the situation. This is what I'm dealing with, you know, and be inclusive with her. It's like, you know,
yeah,
I would need your help, or I need, you know, some patience or whatever it might be.
Yeah. With your woman, for sure. That's what I would say. Mm-hmm. I mean, the exception to getting emotional, it's almost like it has to like emotionally make sense, which is a bit of an oxymoron when you think about it. But it's like your mother died, for example, or someone very close to you passed away, then it makes sense. Or something tragic happened within the family, which would warrant an emotional reaction. Sure. But then it's also how you recover from that too. If you just become an absolute wreck for weeks or months, whatever it is, I mean, look, let's sort of be realistic. If you've lost a parent or someone that you were very close to, of course you're going to feel that way. But I think there's also like this unspoken rule to masculinity, which I think all men, which is like the unspoken thing that we all know, which is, yes, you may have the weight of the world on your shoulders, but unless you take that step to move forward and just put on your armor, you know, like even though you might be bleeding internally, you need to put that armor on so you can go out into the world and do something. I don't think that's toxic masculinity. I think if anything, that's actually divine masculinity, because what that symbolizes is, yes, I'm hurting. Yes, I'm in pain, but I am still prepared to go out there and do what is necessary for those who depend on me, my wife, my girlfriend, my family, whatever it is, because fundamentally, this is one of the primary these are one of the primary operative drives that we as men have. And, I think what's happened is that mentality has been sort of turned up to the nth degree, to the point where it becomes self-destructive, and men don't actually know when to step back from that. So with the guys that I work with, like one of my clients, he's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep working and grinding. My phone's on airplane mode. I don't take calls or messages from anyone. I was like, well, even your girl? And he's like, yeah, even my girl. I was like, I can see a problem coming from a mile off there.
I can say any woman doesn't like to not get attention from their man. That's not a good source. Yeah, it's not a good way of having a relationship.
Or being shut out, right?
Yeah.
But I also recognize it's because he's in that overdrive of, I need to press on, I need to march on, I need to basically do battle. He's on the battlefield. And I said, it's one thing to wage war on, well, ourselves, because that's all we ever really do fight. Even if it's with someone else, it's what we see in the other person. And every man does reach a point, at least once or twice in his life, where he has to prepare to go to war. But you also have to take breaks from your battles, because it's never just one intensive supercut fight. There's skirmishes, there's battles. You go out there, things get kinetic, you withdraw, you have to rest, you have to recover. And it's in those periods of rest and recover that you factor in things like, your relationship, your friendships, because it's in those moments where you can gather information to then take the next move strategically in your pathway. And that was another way in which we got through that. And one aspect that I told him was, I get where you're going, do what you need to do, but don't burn yourself out.
Right.
And that's the other end of the spectrum. So you see, we've covered the spectrum of, I don't know what to do, and falling apart and everything, which repels women, because what they see is the lonely, they just see like a child that's lost control. And the other end of the spectrum is, you're so hyper focused to the point of like a needle hole. That has become your vision, that everything outside of that just ceases to exist. That is also equally repelling to women. So the point I'm making there is, coming back to integration, that's where we need to stay. It's in that midpoint, and being able to fluctuate as and when we need to, and clearly mark out, like, yeah, things are not great, I don't feel great, or whatever it is. Just be open and honest. Mm-hmm. But having a step after that. And then when you're out there doing battle at work or on yourself or whatever it is, go out there and fight intensely, because that's where you really learn about yourself as a man. Right. I think that's the greatest lessons that I've ever learned was when I was in a period of like war with myself, because I'm pushing beyond what I've always known into new areas. And from that knowledge, it actually makes me more sovereign within myself, because I know what works for me and I know what doesn't, and it allows me to select better. And so that then also serves to be more beneficial to a man instead of detrimental. So it's about balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Burnout is really, it's like you're taking care of a family, but to do that, you have to take care of yourself. I think of a care worker who is pushing themselves to the limits, trying to care for somebody else. And I've always reminded them, it's like, you can't care for anybody else if you're not caring for yourself.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does using your SVRN methodology, the shadow, vision, resilience, and new man methodology, how does that help men that are broken from relationships? And how does this set you apart from other coaches or therapists?
Okay. So with the sovereign method, SVRN, every person who signs up and gets into the sovereign program, we first have like an initial assessment where we get to know each other. I then understand what their pain and struggles are. And within that, we have shadowy components. So this is where things start to get a bit Jungian and psychological. I mean, I love this stuff. some
Hmm.
people, some people get a little bit weirded out when you start talking about things like the shadow and the persona and anima and animus. But again, it's all down to how you explain it, right? So for 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 the argument here, we assess the shadowy sides. So what are the emotional hangups? What are the limiting belief systems? What are the ruminating loopholes that you find yourself defaulting to whenever you hit a setback, right? And those are really crucial points to work on because that's essentially like the threshold of which when you reach kind of like breaking point. So I learned this from a therapist that I worked with, where she measured how we have different zones in our life.
Hmm.
When we're super comfortable, we're in the green zone. Not much progress is made there. We have amber, where it's like, okay, that's where a lot of people get into when you're just in the sort of routine of life and you have a few events that challenge you and push you here and there. But then there's the red zone, which is when you really start to feel like I'm either overwhelmed, I feel my triggers coming up, or with someone who isn't as emotionally regulated, it can then lead to crisis. But when you learn the tools that I teach in Sovereign, or if you just look at anyone that talks about somatic wellness and essentially equipping yourself by using internal tools, it helps you hold that red zone. And it's in the red zone that we basically explore the shadow. We understand what causes it to activate. And then we look at how we're going to work from that. So that's how we move into vision. But sorry, so by what I meant to also say was the Sovereign program is a 12-week program.
Hmm.
And so we have clear, demarcated timelines where we spend like 3 weeks in each phase. So there's enough time for one coach client rapport to be built, as well as understanding and gathering the information to be able to make a smooth transition to the next phase. And so we move into the vision where, funnily enough, the first thing we do is we actually create an anti-vision because humans are very good at telling you what they don't want in life, right? Especially, I mean, the amount of times that I've been asked, oh, what do you want in life? And then I'll go on and tell them about everything that I don't want in life.
Hmm.
And so we just flip that on its head, right? So we create an anti-vision of what life is going to look like if you continue in the current cycle that you're in,
Wow.
right?
Hmm.
Or even worse, if you begin to spiral and further fall down the hole and enter the void. We then look at then flipping it on its head, and from there it creates the pillars, right? So each client has a bespoke plan of action where we look at various points that are going to help them essentially commit to the vision, and that's where we start to lay the foundations. So for some person, it could be, waking up consistently a little bit earlier so that they can work on themselves. If they're a busy, if they're like a busy manager or like a CEO, for example, where their time is very scarce during the daytime, or perhaps even just like tracking their workouts a little bit better, cleaning up the diet. So we bring in the holistic elements that contribute to just good human welfare, as I call it. From there, we then move into the measures of resilience, where we start to like really drive in more with the somatic elements, the protocols, right? Right from the get go, everyone's doing the 4-7-8 breathing protocol because that is what creates the circuit break, as well as the emotional and nervous system purge. But then we start to go a little bit deeper into specific resilience protocols that some people may need. But it usually shows up in mindfulness techniques such as being present when going on like a 10-15 minute walk. No earphones, no podcasts, no noise, because that's an issue, right? There'll probably be people who'll be listening to this podcast while they're driving or on a walk or in the gym, which is cool, which is fine. But as a mindfulness exercise to truly connect with yourself, one thing that I tell everybody to do, whether they're in the gym, whether they go for a walk or run, whatever it is, do it without headphones, without any form of external input, and then observe using your five senses the area around you. So you're creating more of a grounded and connected feeling to your surrounding environment, and then also the people and animals and just objects around you. Because the way that I look at us as humans and the way that we exist in this world is we are part of like one massive neural network. We are all just little nodes in this humongous tree that just like with all these branches that go around the world. And so when we are present within our present situation, it makes it easier for us to actually work off information that is pertinent to us there and then. You're not worrying about what happened 10,000 miles overseas because you're listening to it via podcast or looking at your news app or whatever it is. You're actually focusing more on yourself. And from that, a lot of the people who do the practice have come back and told me, man, I didn't realize that I have a bit of a wheeze when I'm walking, and I wondered why that is. And it's just like, oh, well, now you know. Or, when I went on my walk, I realized that I have a little bit of like a pain in my hip or something. And now because of that, I've gone to yoga classes, and that's helped me with my posture, which has made me feel more confident. So it creates this stack of, I call it like compounding awareness, but that awareness is what it actually ties into the framework, which I call CIA, conscious integrated awareness, because you're consciously aware of everything that's happening around you and within yourself. And that is how we create integration. Because from that, in this resilience phase, the students learn that whatever they feel and how they look at themselves internally is directly projected into the external reality, the world, which is then mirrored back at them, right? And I love the expression, and some people might be like, oh, here we go, he's going into like esoteric guru mode. But as within, so without, man. It's
Say it again.
As within, so without.
Right.
As above, so below, as within, so without. I believe that's from the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just, that expression just rings so true, because from my own personal experience, everything that I felt within myself, which led to an emotion which anchored within my body, which then created a belief system, then started to shape the way in which I looked at the world and how the world would treat me. So the resilience phase is well, all of them are just as important as the other, but the resilience, especially when it comes to reshaping the way in which the individual starts to look at themselves and then the world. And then the final phase, which is like the new man, which is it's like a consolidation window where we look at every phase that we've done over the program and just keep reinforcing on building the new foundations, right? So they say, the numbers always change, but I believe that personally, for a new lifestyle to take place, it takes 90 days of consistent action, or as consistent as possible, right? As long as you are staying engaged, as long as you are still in the process, it'll, even sometimes baby steps on some days, that's the consistency. And after 90 days, you are a very different person, because I can only say, like, I'm living proof of that. When I went through my own, I guess, like, transformative period, it took me 12 weeks. And I think for some people that may seem like a long time, but when you think about it, in the scheme of, okay, let's look at like a calendar year, that's 3 months, right? Give or take. when you look at the timeline of your life,
Right.
to change from who you were in this probably very reactive, emotionally charged, feeling constantly on edge, relying on stimulants, sometimes maybe even drugs, alcohol, like uppers, downers, to be your source of regulation, to learning how to do all of that by simply using your breath, your body, and conscious, intentional thought, to then becoming a completely different person in some regard, or at the very least, improving on all of the negative elements and making them into strikingly noticeable changes. To me personally, that's worth it. it's
Yeah.
it's worth the 90 days, right?
Yeah.
And from the results that I've seen with the few guys that I've worked with, I mean, yeah, it is truly amazing to be a part of that process.
Right. Right. And it's a commitment. I mean, to change
That's
yourself
right.
like this, it's usually, it has to come from a place of something pretty traumatic has happened in your world,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you're going to make a commitment to be like, okay, if I'm going to have to change things, I'm really going to have to look at myself and make a commitment to that change. Because it, I think it takes what, about 5 weeks to change a habit or
Yeah.
something like that, and that's just like a habit of, something. I'm just trying to think of something just regular. Like I'm trying to switch from having bacon every morning to having some fruit, something like that, and you're just trying to change. Rather, this is like your mindset over decades, and you're like, I don't like my outcomes anymore. And it's been
Yeah.
very detrimental to who, everything I'm in my world. If I were to make a change, this is what I got to do. And it's not easy. So it's like taking that commitment to yourself to the nth degree and saying, if I really want this to happen, I'm really going to have to make a commitment to myself to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes a little bit of yeah, I think
A coach, maybe a,
the
a good
yeah,
coach
yeah,
or something. Yeah.
a good coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good coach that's able to give you a little bit of a nudge, without it sounding as too pushy.
Right.
But
Right.
like I mean, just from when that's also another thing. Good coaches also have coaches.
Of
So,
course.
they see your blind spots. They see the gaps, and they're able to be like, hey, so I know you kind of have this like life philosophy that everything is this way, but have you maybe considered that it might be a little bit of that?
Right.
Not to burst your bubble, but is there a way that maybe you could bridge the two? And then after some thought and maybe a mini existential crisis, you're like, oh yeah,
Right.
yeah, you're right.
And it's I always look at that kind of thing as coming from a place of maybe love, concern, basically like saying, "Hey man, here's some guardrails.
Yeah,
You're kind of hitting that guardrail and you're trying to get off track. Let's focus up a little bit
yeah,
and get
100%.
back on, I rather than going, you know what, why are you critiquing me? Rather than being all, hey, stop. I mean, I think it's a sign of a good coach to be to another coach to be like, hey, here's some feedback. And then the first coach going, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
Perfect.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
If you're listening right now and thinking, I've been burned before, I don't know who to trust, take a breath. Sravan's story is proof that healing isn't about hype, it's about integrity, structure, and showing up. Head over to his YouTube channel at Sravan Allopi or check out the Sovereign Man coaching site to explore tools that actually work under fire. And if this episode is hitting home, share it with a brother who needs it. Let's continue. So, what's your take on certifications versus lived experience when it comes to choosing a coach?
Man, so many of these topics have been conversations I've had,
Mm.
even earlier today. So I was actually speaking to my mother about this, because so I've currently enrolled in a course to study counseling. I think it's accredited over here in the UK by the HCPC, which is like a clinical board in the UK,
Mm.
and it's a level 2 counseling course. And I had this conversation with my mom, like, do, I'm doing this thing, but should I really be doing it? And she said, well, look, at the end of the day, certifications only really show you, or show, excuse me, show the person that you've met the academic requirements. You've done the theory, you've maybe done the practice, you've ticked the box in order to get the piece of paper. And that's not to sound derogatory or patronizing to any clinical professionals or any professional to any capacity. But when we're speaking specifically about using that knowledge and applying it in real world settings, I've seen plenty of doctors, I've worked with plenty of doctors who are qualified, but man, they've got the personality of a sandbag. You know, they can't relate to patients. They're so stuck in there. I'm the subject matter expert, therefore what I say is right. And I've I've had some conversations where I've tried to like gently broach the subject with them, and they just shut it down so aggressively because they cling to that certificate, that qualification, as if it's their life force. And to me personally, that is a sign of an untrustworthy individual. Because one thing that people also tend to forget is that, especially when you're thinking about clinical elements, is that guidelines change. Because research is conducted by humans, and humans are constantly discovering new practices. So when new practices change, so do the guidelines, which means that the individuals that go into the new generation of training are going to be learning newer guidelines. So when you go out into the wider world, you're going to see like old school versus new, you know, these new guys, and there's the clash between that too. It's like, oh, these new guys don't know. It's like, oh, these dinosaurs are operating in the Stone Age. So then it comes down to the question of, well, who do I actually listen to? And so when it comes to qualifications versus lived experience, I would take lived experience any day over someone with qualification, because only through lived experience do you have, one, the obvious firsthand experience and knowledge. Two, you can then use that to apply in real world scenarios and adapt it depending on who the recipient is. And that is not only a sign that you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're talking about, it shows that they've also got emotional intelligence, so they can connect with you as a human being. That is like the primary directive of, I think, any job, any organization, any business model. If you were to look at it, it's to identify the ideal client type and then speak directly to them, right? Well, how do you do that? Well, learn who they are as a human being and then mirror that. And it's the same thing when it comes to coaches versus certified professionals.
Yeah. That leads into my next question is like, how can men distinguish between a coach who's selling hope and one who's offering transformation?
I think any coach worth his or her salt would have gone through their own process themselves. They would have gone through their own transformation, and the framework in which they use to help other people transform, they themselves have done it. And like, again, soft plug here, but when it comes to sovereign and even, you know, the conscious integrated awareness framework, which essentially both go hand in hand, that's what I studied. That's what I learned. That's what I was taught by mother. And that's what I applied to myself, combined with the various different pockets of knowledge that I pulled from, right? And that's when I came up with, sovereign. It makes sense. It just, you know, you spend enough time in the workshop, eventually something clicks. Sure. And that's when I thought, right, well, it's these specific frameworks that helped me get out of the dark hole that I was in to where I am now. And so when I speak to prospective clients, or even like here, for example, on this podcast, it's just very easy for me to talk about. Someone who's going to sell you hope, you know what you will notice is that they will hype you up. It's almost like going to like it's like going to like a Tony Robbins workshop where everybody is just so high on energy. Everyone's high-fiving, shouting hell yeah, and like all this stuff. Right? No disrespect to him, but it's like that kind of energy where on the call, the coach will promise you the world. They'll make these guarantees, these crazy guarantees. That's actually another thing that I was talking about earlier, which is, you know, people that make guarantees and offers that seem too good to be true, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, usually it's a duck, right?
Yeah. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is, right? So there's that as well. And a coach that sells transformation, I just keep coming back to you'll just hear it in their voice. You hear the authenticity, you'll feel the energy from them. They're not there to sell you anything. They're not there. I mean, yeah, okay, sure. Like you can sign up and we go through the transformation process, but they're not there to make a sale. They're there to have a conversation, tell you what they've done. And if you want the same thing, they can show you how. And the exchange is simply, okay, you compensate me for the time that I'm going to put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because like with the guys, like when I talk about my own practice with the guys that I work with, the people who sign up, over that 12-week period, I am accessible to them Monday to Friday via text. And then we have scheduled calls. Right. In between those calls, I'm looking at the data that I've gathered, sending them notes, sending them, bits to work on. And then there's like little pockets where we have like text, like mirror sessions where they engage with me, I engage with them. That all takes time. Like sometimes I've had to remind myself when I'm sitting down for dinner with my family that, hey, okay, I need to wind it down. Right. So that's the exchange between being paid for services rendered onto the other person versus I'm just going to sell you this course that I put together with ChatGPT. Here you go. Thanks for the money. Off you go. Bye. Like those are the main differences that I've seen personally.
No, makes sense. You've worked with executives and high performers. What's the common emotional wound you see in ambitious men post-divorce or heartbreak?
Worthiness. It's worthiness. And a lot of it comes from the home environment where they were either made to feel or based off of their own interpretation of events, such as, both parents may have stuck together, but they may have been like financial struggle. And because of that, they had to like eat a certain brand of food, and when they went to school they were picked on because of it. That then that's what like lays down some pretty deep hurtful anchors, and it's that sense of worthiness. It's like, well, unless I'm performing to a certain level or I have X amount of resources or I am a certain way, I'm just not worthy of rest. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of even time. And so that's where a lot of these guys will bury their heads in work. They may, they have families of their own, but they're never fully present. They become reactive when they reach a point where, they're essentially like scattered in the wind, right? Like it's just scattershot, where they're doing a little bit here, a little bit there, while trying to deal with the demands of work. And ultimately it comes down to the worthiness wound. And that's a shadow that I think, if I had to take a wild guess, I think the majority of men carry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of... Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just rounding my point.
Yeah, I was just going to say what you're describing is I've seen, a few successful men where their relationships are beginning to fail because of what you just said. They get so focused in their job that they forget that they have a loved one at home that would like their attention as well. And it makes sense that there's just this trauma that they're still dealing with.
Yeah.
And they're trying to overcompensate.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, just to make it abundantly clear for anyone that's listening, I'm not a licensed therapist. And let's
put that out there. We're going to have a disclaimer.
Yeah, just a quick disclaimer, just in case, because
neither of us are licensed therapists. You need to seek a professional licensed therapist for this stuff. These are just suggestions. Yeah,
right, exactly. Because with words like trauma and even like addictions and things like that. It's like the hard hitting stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And
You're right. Yeah.
this is also where I kind of made an argument, and this is going to be a video that I'm going to be putting out soon,
Mhm.
which is how in some cases working with a coach could be more beneficial
Mhm.
than working with a therapist, because it is almost in a way like the double-edged sword of you don't, as a coach, you're not held to the same sort of legal standards as a therapist might be,
Right.
which, yeah, sure, for those who would choose to exploit, there's loopholes that they can escape through. But for those who genuinely are out there to make a difference and help, it means that they have a bit more flexibility in the way in which that they can deploy their assets and their methodology. So when I speak to the guys that I work with, this is one of the reasons why I work so heavily on the somatic element, because it is through the felt experience that you access the material that lies beneath the surface, right? And this isn't armchair psychology. Like I've done the research into Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche's work, and it's all to do with the shadow. It's all to do with shadow work. So I sort of prepare them for it, because you also have to be ready to access it. Otherwise, it can be very disturbing. But again, it's a contained space, first of all. And I mean, this is why, I'll die on that hill where I say that it's the somatic element that truly makes the biggest changes. Because okay, so like let's think about it this way. When you have an issue, is your default response to try and logic your way out of it, or do you try and sit with the feeling?
I have a bad, bad habit of trying to be I get overly logical,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
becoming very self-aware of that issue.
Yeah. So I think that's just all men across the board, if I'm honest. Even myself, sometimes when I run into my own problems, and I'll be very transparent about that, and I'll just think, oh, fuck, like, oh, maybe I just need to work through it. I just need to work through it. And then,
Right.
I'll be good. I'll be good. And then, well, it doesn't work. And then I get a bit more frustrated, and I think, you know what, maybe if I just work a little bit harder, I'll be fine. Instead of cutting off at 7 p.m. when I should have, I'll work till 2 a.m. and then wonder why I feel like afterwards. Well, maybe it's because you should have actually just cut it off and sat with what was going on and worked through it.
Yes.
But then it's the same thing with the other guys, right? And so the somatic release, because that's where I believe let's say like the trauma, the doubt, the memories are stored within the body. And this is something that EMDR therapists actually work with their clients. So I had an EMDR therapy session about a year and a half ago. And the process that she talked me through was, she got me to revisit the memory. She actually retold it to me like it was a script. And through the process, I had to identify what I was feeling, the temperature, what color it was, where it was in the body. Is it a friend or foe? There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, right? But that actually helped me isolate it, understand it, and then purge it from my system. And the same principle gets applied to breath work, specifically when you're working with nervous system regulation, breathing techniques. There's also conscious connected breathing, although that you've also got to be in the right frame of mind for, because that can be it heightens your senses. So if you're not ready for it, then it can get pretty crazy. Right. But that's also where another tool that I use with everyone is called reflective writing, which is a little different to journaling. It's effectively like journaling, but instead of just brain dumping, you are now writing out what you're feeling and then scanning what you're writing to identify and isolate the parts that speak out to you. And then you're essentially reverse engineering that point to get to the core of what the issue is. And for a lot of these guys, it might be something like, oh, I don't understand why, but I just get really triggered when some of them have meetings with like their board partners, and it's got nothing to do with the nature of the work. But like one guy told me that it was because his board partner reminded him of his late father, and he never had the opportunity to sort of like go through that. Right. And that's where that stuck energy was. Sure. And so these tools are almost like the way I look at them in a way is kind of like I use the nuclear reactor core analogy quite often. Mm-hmm. If you imagine you have a nuclear power plant with a reactor core at the center, but the rods are all fried, it's not going to be able to power the station. And in fact, if you keep trying to push that lever to power it up, you're going to get a cracked core, which leads to a meltdown and then a mass explosion. And that's pretty much what happens to, I think, every guy when we try to logic our way through our issues and punch through them. Even if we come out on the other side seemingly okay, that shadow knows everything and it's still with you. And that's the reason why there are guys who are getting ripped and jacked in the gym and everything, but they can't even speak to a woman. They can't approach a female. Or they'll get into a relationship and they just crumble. They have, avoidance tendencies, anxious attachment styles, right? Like, yeah, that's another rabbit hole, but it all, yeah. We should just make a mini series at this point, man.
Right.
But basically you got to change the rods with things that serve you. And so that's where I use these principles to help these guys identify, like, this is, yes, a worthiness wound, but it doesn't end there.
Right.
And you can do something about it. Right. And, so far to this day, touch wood, everyone that's gone through the Sovereign program has improved not just the relationship with their families, but I would say most importantly, the relationship with themselves. Because a man's world is a reflection of himself and everything around it. So, yeah,
no,
that's yeah.
You've said success lies in the boring tasks. How does that apply to rebuilding trust and emotional safety in relationships?
Just consistently showing up, like especially if there's been a tumultuous relationship and perhaps divorce has been threatened, used, like drawn as a card. That's always a very sticky subject for, I think, most people, but for men especially, right? Because it really does. It can cripple and destroy a man's life. Showing up consistently and also just, it's the little things that matter, I think this is also another part where, as part of our communication skills, listening is a big part of it too. When we look at what the partner is saying to us, it actually doesn't hurt to ask for clarity, to ask for clarification, right? And in some cases, it's literally as simple as, okay, can you just clarify and just tell me what it is you're asking of me to do? Because when women are in an emotionally reactive state, they speak in that like emotional, like encoding language, which it sounds like we're trying to crack like a vault in Fort Knox. We just don't get it. We're like, I'll just address what I'm hearing, but not what I'm listening to, because naturally we fall into fixer mode. Yeah. But most of the time, women don't want their problems to be fixed for them. They just want to be listened to and heard. And so with that, it's okay, ask for clarity if you're unsure, and reassure the other person by just showing up for them, right? And so long as it doesn't, I guess, compromise your values, being able to help meet them in the middle. I think that's one of the main drivers on repairing the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of add on to that a little bit, I think that these issues also are very necessary to building stronger bonds. So one thing I've noticed with society is the moment an argument comes up and people know about it, they think that's it, it's over, game over, they're about to crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
But then they'll see a couple that are so with it and together and understand each other, and they ask, so what's the recipe to success and the key to this happy marriage or life? And more than often they'll say, like, learn how to fight, like learn how to argue with each other. And in fact, it's in the rupture that the greatest steps are made. Like, just go back to the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
We only learn about ourselves and we only grow when we're in that red zone. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I also tell the guys who do have relationship issues is, first, find your anchor, ground yourself, because if she's a cyclone and if you're a cyclone, you're both just going to spin off into the void. Mm-hmm. You need to anchor yourself, and however that sort of shows up to you, whether it means go to the gym, hit a session, go for a run, mm-hmm. do some breathwork, grounding exercises. That's why you've got the toolkit. Use your toolkit, but be grounded. Mm-hmm. Then when you show up, be present with your partner. Mm-hmm. Listen to what she's saying. And if she is speaking in an enigma to you because you just can't understand what she's saying, ask for some clarity, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where, like, compassion and empathy has to come into the equation, right? It needs to come into the equation. And so those are key points to kind of hold in the balance and consistently show up to build and, like, weave, tighter, stitch together the fabric again. And every time there's a rupture, and if you do achieve repair, your relationship will be stronger.
Yeah.
Because you've gone through the battle together.
Right. I heard one technique of echoing back what the question is. If a woman is, like, if she's upset and she's emotional, mm-hmm. and she's saying things to her, for clarity, just echo back what she's asking. Mm-hmm. But I also heard Orion Taraban say something to the effect of, try and remember to do this, like, statement sandwich. I can't remember exactly. I'm paraphrasing, but he says, if you can, remember to put, if, like, her statement is, you don't love me. Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking, oh, wow, she doesn't love me anymore, and I can try and do all the things that I've proven to her, I've done this before, she should love. Why is she saying that? Instead of just thinking that, just go, remember to say to yourself that she's thinking, I feel, and then you don't love me, and then the other half of the sandwich is right now. You know, and just put these two things in there, and then just try and, and obviously it's super hard if you're hearing something where it's like, wait a minute, how could you say that? I've done this and this for you. But she's just, I feel, and at the very end, right now.
That's a great way to look at it too. And I suppose that also is all the more reason why it's so important to anchor and ground yourself first. So you're approaching it from a space of, groundedness. You're secure and you're able to weather the storm, right? It's like, this expression's been in my head, so I have to share it with you. Yeah. It's a quote by the Buddha, which was, when you yourself can be like the mountain, you can weather any storm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so poignant, especially for where we're at with masculinity today. That's where we need to go. And I know we've been talking a lot about relationships, but this applies to everything, like the universal relationship, the relationship, primarily with yourself. Mm-hmm. And of course, you've got romantic relationships, but then relationships with your peers, with your friends, with colleagues, and your relationship to the world around you. And the more you can become that, like the mountain, like that solid, like stoic mountain that just weathers any storm and doesn't get affected by cyclones, tornadoes, tsunamis, whatever. I truly believe, and You know the quote, the whole like the high value man thing. I mean, God, that makes me want to yak so hard whenever I hear it. I think of it as high quality individual,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not even about putting quantitative meaning to an individual. That's just ridiculous. But when you look at the values of the individual that then determine their quality, I believe that if there's one thing that each man should strive to achieve in his life is to become like the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Because from there, I feel it's like that's when life just starts to bend to your will. And
Mm-hmm.
relationships also, it's like you find that you will deal with less reactivity.
Yes. What you're reminding me of is like I've been asked what would be a suggestion that I could give women when, if they're trying to vet a guy or date some guy and they're just unsure of what his values are or where he lies. You reminded me of how I just suggest look at his actions over his words. And it'll weed out narcissists. It'll weed out those guys that may have bad values. It'll weed out those guys that may do, things that are unsavory if they're by themselves. What do they do when they're alone? Are they going to do the right thing, or that kind of analogy? But yeah, it's like look at someone's actions, and I love that. Be the mountain; it weathers any storm. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess one last question, and we kind of touched on this before, but it's like if a guy is skeptical about online coaches, what's one tactical exercise you'd recommend to help build discernment and self-trust?
Ooh, what's one tactical exercise? That's a good one. Just one, because
if you want to add more, you can. Yeah.
well, I think like the obvious one would be like looking at the work that they've done.
Yeah.
Especially in the online space, because I think especially with social media like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you have, right? Online landing pages and whatnot. That's like your portfolio. That shows you the work that you've done. It shows a little bit of your timeline. There's little elements of your history in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that probably the most effective way would be to look at their work, look at client testimonials, but then also listen to the types of testimonials, because it's very easy for people to just go and get like screenshot testimonials off. They pay some guy on Viva or whatever it is.
Oh yeah,
I mean, like God, it's bad. But like I know, like on my page, I've got a lot of like written testimonials from people that I've worked with, and then I've got I just got a video testimonial from a guy that I just finished and closed session with. But everything that is up there, it's quite bespoke. And so when you also look at the way it's structured, this is where I say use critical thinking, use critical thought in order to sort of like drive your discernment. When you listen to a video testimonial or you look at a written testimonial, does it look like it was just pumped out by AI? Right. Or is it very generic? Are there like all the buzzwords in there? Because look, AI is good, but it's not that good, right? And also somebody who hasn't actually experienced your service is going to give some half-baked response because all they care about is the $20 that they're getting in exchange for the testimonial, right? Yeah. So I would say that, that. And if I could just add one other aspect is hop on a call with them and get a feel for them. Yeah. And it just goes back to the points that, we mentioned earlier in the conversation, because the human gut and intuition is, honestly, in my opinion, probably the most intelligent biomechanical like creation out there. Right. Always trust your gut. Every time that I have gone with my gut, there's always been a reason for it. And the same thing happens when you speak to people. And there's a lot of information you can gather from that.
Yeah, no, perfect. Brilliant. We've covered so much today. The Sovereign SVRN framework, 478 technique, quoting Dr. K. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think just to round everything off, I think that where we are right now, it's a very pivotal moment for people, for humanity. I think the age of deception is done. It's done there. But still, while we're entering this transition, do your due diligence. If there's two main points to take away from this is we need to reconnect with our ability to critically think for ourselves and not just judge things based off face value, and also do a little bit more research and take a closer look at things before we decide to make big commitments, and also reconnect with empathy, not just for others, but empathy for ourselves, because that is what actually creates that cohesive glue that allows us to build communities and form the relationships that we seek. So that's how I would like to sort of end it off there.
Sure. And lastly, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube. Just search my name, Sravan Allopi. Same for Instagram. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Sravan Allopi reminds us that healing isn't a performance, it's a practice. Whether you're rebuilding after heartbreak or questioning who to trust in the coaching space, his story offers clarity, structure, and hope. If this episode stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe, share, and start your own journey towards sovereignty. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep building your legacy. Sravan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks,
man.
Glenn.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.